Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And welcome back to the reading course on the Sufi path of knowledge. I don't remember what number this session is, but we've made some fairly good progress. Um, I think that this is like the third chapter or something, and we're doing pretty well, or something like that, but we'll find out anyways. Um, yeah. Now, I don't remember exactly what we covered in the past few months. 14. Mm. Uh, yeah, so this might be session 14. Thank you very much. Yeah, Jazakallah khairan. So I don't remember what exactly we covered, but it's definitely to do with the divine attributes. And so the Sheikh Al-Akbar is just building up on what it means. I mean, he's showing you the building blocks. He's showing you the building blocks of his system. Um, so, okay, so let's make a start, inshallah. Okay, course 15. Okay, fine. Um, yeah, yeah. So here we are on page 73. Thank you, Yasmin. And I remember we stopped at the bottom, right? So combining incomparability and similarity. That's tanzih and tashbih. Uh, so I can start reading, and then like someone can help me along as we progress. Okay, Bismillah. So as we see repeatedly, the Sheikh often quotes the verse, "Nothing is like him, ليس كمثله شيء," and he is the hearing and seeing. He's the seeing and the hearing. وهو سميع بصير. As a Quranic proof that God combines attributes of incomparability and similarity, right? Um, does anyone just want to quickly recap for me what does incomparability, tanzih, and similarity, tashbih mean?
Is it basically that God doesn't isn't like basically uh wait the absoluteness of God would be incomparability, and similarity would be those things that we also manifest from him and we know basically, like hearing and seeing. We can hear and see, but he is the eternal. um, that would be something that only he has in the absolute sense.
Yeah, so like if any religion, any philosophy is built on these two really simple ideas of tanzih and tashbih, and it's going to constitute a combination of those two things of some sort. And some religions and philosophies will emphasize tanzih more, and some religions and philosophies will emphasize tashbih more, right? So tanzih is the way in which God is not like us. He's unlike us. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. There is absolutely nothing like him, right? And so it tends to emphasize the attributes, the sifat al-jadaliyah, the attributes of majesty, of how different he is to us, of how distant he is from us, right? Whereas the attributes of Tashbih tend to emphasize how close he is to us. And they're kind of like attributes of warmth, and nearness. So the sifat al-jamaliyah, the attributes of beauty, right? And so you need both to be able to see divinity properly. If you've only got one, then you're blind in one eye. And so your spiritual vision becomes lopsided. So that's why we talk about them. Okay, so this is what the Sheikh al-Akbar says now in the Futuhat al-Makkiyah. The rational faculty has come with one half the knowledge of God, that is, the declaration of incomparability and the negation of multiple properties from Him. So this is really important. The It's actually the aql, the intellect, the rational thinking faculty, our mind, that can detect God's tanzih, his incomparability. That's the instrument we use. What's the instrument we use to understand his tashbih or to perceive his tashbih? The instrument we use to perceive his tashbih is the heart and the imagination. It is the heart and the imagination. Exactly. Thank you. I don't know. Exactly. And that's how we perceive him with tashbih. And so, if you only know God through your rational faculty, that's just one half of knowledge. And that's mentioned in the Fusus al-Hikam and Fass al-Yas. So he mentions that, like, the Prophet Sayyidina Idris alayhi salam, he became a pure intellect. His knowledge was the knowledge of holiness, but he was so proficient in the knowledge of God's holiness that he himself became a disengaged spirit and intellect, as if he became pure light. And so he joined the angels. Now, the angels specialize in the knowledge of intellectual spirituality. They know God through the intellect. If you think about your body, there's a reason why each faculty is placed in the position where your body is. Okay, so the intellect is close to your brain, so it tends to be up above in your body. Whereas the faculties of passion, like your appetites, they're below, they're lower, they're base. But the attributes and the faculties of what are high and lofty, they're up, like in your brain, right? Um, so the angels are like that. They're lofty, and they understand God and they connect to God through tanzih mainly, through his incomparability. So Sayyidina Idris alayhi salam, he was like that. And so Sheikh Al-Akbar says he only had one half of knowledge. So he says something strange. He so when he did that, he ascended to heaven as a pure intellect, but in order to complete his knowledge, he required the knowledge of tashbih, the attributes of similarity. So he came back down. He descended as Ilyas in order to complete his knowledge. So any like religious, spiritual person, even if they're extremely personal, excuse me, even if they're extremely spiritual, if their knowledge of God is primarily through the intellect, right? That's just half of knowledge. That's not full knowledge. So then the Sharia brings you the rest of that knowledge through tashbih. And that's why the divinely revealed laws, the laws given to the prophets, what are called the Sharia, are so important. So then he continues, but the lawgiver brought news of God by affirming what the rational faculties proofs the lala have negated from him, and establishing what the rational faculty has stripped from him. Because it's the rational faculty's job to tell you what traits are impossible for God and therefore inappropriate to his majesty. The lawgiver brought both things because of the perfection appropriate to God, while rational faculties remained bewildered. This is the perfection of divinity. The sensory and imaginative faculties demand by their essences to see him who brought them into existence, while rational faculties demand by their essences and their proofs, such as negation, affirmation, necessity, permissibility, and possibility, to know him who brought them into existence. Hence, God addressed the senses and imagination with the disengagement, tajreed, established by the proofs provided by rational faculties. The senses listen to God's address, and they and imagination become bewildered. They say, we have nothing of that in our hands. Then God addressed the rational faculties with the declaration of similarity established by the senses and imagination. So he talks to each one with the opposite of what they bring. The rational faculties listen, become bewildered. They say, we have nothing of that in our hands. Just to show you that there is no faculty we possess that's complete. Each one is incomplete in itself, which establishes God's tawheed, right? So God is high above the perception of rational faculties because you don't have one faculty that can perceive God like completely. If you want to see God completely, You need the assistance of all faculties, which just proves that you're poor. You're poor towards your faculties, you're therefore poor towards God. There is no one faculty that can perceive God completely. Imagination can't perceive God completely. The rational faculty can't perceive God completely. Right? So then he says in a different passage, sound rational faculties, which recognize God's majesty, are bewildered. But the people of interpretation, Ahl Ta'wil, are not bewildered, nor do they hit their target, that is, by plunging into interpretation. Even if they should conform to the doctrine and ilm, they have committed they have committed a forbidden act about which they'll be questioned on the day of resurrection. They and everyone who speaks about his essence declares him incomparable with what he has attributed to himself, and prefers his own rational faculty to his faith and the judgment of his own consideration to the doctrine concerning his Lord. So Ahl Ta'wil, I don't know exactly who they are, but he's talking about I think the Mutakallimun, but those um, individuals who will pronounce a judgment on God's essence and say his essence is like this and not like that. Or they'll basically say, here is why it is inappropriate to talk about, to say anything about God's essence. But then the Quran and divine revelation will talk about God, and they'll say things like they'll interpret away the attributes of similarity that you find in the Quran and say, no, no, you know that's not what it means. What it really means is this and that. So if you don't stick to the divine word and you are disrespectful to the divine word, you get questioned about that on the day of resurrection. One of the more classical examples is God's seating on the throne, for example, right? Um, you know, does he actually sit on the throne or not? And so the Mutakallimun debate that and have debated that throughout the centuries. What does that actually mean? Um, but the Sheikh Akbar's method is that you stick to the word that God has provided in the Quran and you view the verses of Tajbih through the lens of Tanzih. So his sitting on the throne is real, but it's in a way we can't imagine. Um, there's nothing. His seating on the throne is in a way which has no comparison. We don't know how it is. It's not a pure metaphor. So then he says, God knew that he had deposited within the rational faculty acceptance toward that which is given both by the real al-haq and by the reflective faculty al-quwwat al-mufakkira. He well knew that he had placed in the reflective faculty free disposal within and domination over the existent things. He knew that the reflective faculty had to dominate over the rational faculty by reflection upon the essence of him who gave it existence, i.e., God. Therefore, he had pity on the rational faculty in this respect, since he knew that it would fall short of achieving what it was trying to do. Hence, he addressed it through the Quran. God warns you about himself, and God is clement to the servants. God warns you about thinking about God's essence, and God is Halim. He's being clement, compassionate towards you by giving you this warning. He says, we have only cautioned you against rationally considering the essence of God out of mercy and pity toward you. We know that the reflective faculty tells the rational faculty to negate the attributes we have affirmed through the tongues of our messengers, right? If you stuck to your rational faculty in an extreme sense, you only use your rational faculty to think about God. The rational faculty by itself will negate what the messengers bring, which you can't do because we have faith in what the messengers brought, so we believe and affirm in what they brought. So you therefore have to affirm what they have brought. So people reject these attributes with their proofs. So the ones who do that are deprived of faith and suffer everlasting wretchedness, shaqawa. Then God commanded the messenger of God to prohibit us from reflecting upon God's essence. And their doctrines became diverse. Each of them spoke about what his own consideration required. One of them would deny exactly what the other affirmed. They did not agree on a single thing concerning God in respect to their consideration of his essence, and they disobeyed God and his messenger by speaking about it, since God had prohibited them from doing that out of mercy toward them. They shrank from God's mercy. So their striving goes astray in the present life while they think they are working good deeds. Some of them said he is a cause, like he is a sabab. Others said he's not a cause. Others said the essence of the real cannot be a substance, an accident, or a corporeal body. On the contrary, his being, his aniya, is identical with his quiddity, his mah. So his aniya is identical to his mahiyya and does not fit into any of the 10 categories. These are the 10 categories of Aristotle. They went on in this manner and became like the proverb says, I hear the grinding, but I don't see any flour. Like when you grind, the wheat to create flour, you're grinding, but you're not producing any results. Like I hear the grinding of your brain, but you're not getting anywhere. You're not actually reaching the reality of what God is. Then the law came from the messengers. So when the law came, it contradicted everything proven by rational faculties. It mentioned God's coming. So these are the sorts of things that the rational faculty finds abhorrent. It mentioned God's coming, descent, sitting, rejoicing, laughter, hand, foot, and every attribute of temporally originated things. Temporally originate means arising out of time, because laughing is something that happens in time. You don't tend to think of it as an eternal attribute, whereas the rational faculty needs to have an eternal attribute when it talks to God, because only eternal attributes are appropriate to God's majesty for the rational faculty. Yeah, things that has been um, temporally originated things that has been transmitted in the sound traditions in the hadith. Then it brought the Quranic verse, there is nothing like him, even though these attributes have been affirmed. If they were impossible, if they were really impossible, as the rational faculty indicates, God would not have ascribed them to himself. And the true report would be a lie. But God sent no messenger save with the of um, tongue of his people that he might make clear to them what he sent down to them and that they might understand. The prophet made clear, delivered the message, and called God to witness before his community that he had delivered the risala, the message. So through nothing is like him, we are ignorant of the exact nature of the attribution. We understand what is intelligible from the revealed words, and that what is intelligible is single, in respect of that for which the words have been coined. But the attributions are diverse in accordance with the diversity of the objects to which attribution is made, though the realities are not diverse, since realities do not change. Hence, he who stops at these words and their meanings and maintains that he does not have the knowledge of the attribution to the real is a man of knowledge and faith. So what he means is that if you stop with the words of God and you say, I don't actually know what he means by this, then that's fine. You don't have to make a judgment about what these like ambiguous words, the mutashabihat, what do the ambiguous parts of the Quran mean? Um, like when God says, we should try you until we know, but God's knowledge is eternal. So what on earth does he mean when he says until we know, right? So the man or woman of faith says, I believe in them, and I'm not gonna try and investigate what they mean. So you're called an alim mu'min. But he who attributes them in a specific sense of application outside of corporealization, tajsim, is neither a man of faith nor a man of knowledge. If this person who rationally considers the essence of God were just, he would not consider God's essence and would have faith in what has come from God, since proofs have shown him that the report giver, the messenger, has spoken the truth. This is what has held me back in this chapter from speaking about God's essence in accordance with what the proofs of the rational faculty offer. Yes, Irvina, go ahead.
I didn't quite understand this sentence, but he who attributes them in a specific sense. Could you elaborate on it more?
So let's go back to the example of like sitting on the throne. right? The outward sense means like it implies a certain kind of corporealization, but we say in language, not in reality, um, because we don't attribute a body to God for very obvious reasons, because then that would delimit him. That would make him limited in time and space, but he exists outside time and space. But at the very least, you have to acknowledge that the words um, they imply corporealization in language. Corporealization means to turn into a body. Like who sits on a throne? A body, right? Like a physical body sits on a throne. That's what it implies. Um, so he's talking about the difficulties of doing tafsir, right? If you say, I conclude from that verse that God is a physical body, like Ibn Taymiyyah, right? Sheikh Al-Akbar rejects that completely. And he says, no, you got it wrong. Um, yeah, that's completely wrong. But if you try to run away from it, on the other hand, and you say, okay, it means, so for example, Muhammad Asad does this. So he's following like a Mu'tazili approach. And he says, like, what that verse means is God is seated on the throne of his awesome power. So that's like very abstract. It's very metaphorical. So you've now run away from the outward sense of the verse. So he says, if you do that, then you're also neither a man of faith nor knowledge, because that's also completely wrong, because you've negated the outward sense of the verses. You see? So that's what that means. But the place of faith is to say, I believe what the words say, but I can't know exactly what it means because I don't know how God sits on the throne. Like, what does that mean? I don't really know, but I believe in it. Um, so you know how like these discussions become quite dry? Yeah, they matter to the intellectual elite for a lot of reasons. For us, what we're concerned with is you don't need to get into all those details. But like for example, if I there's only something specific that I personally want to take away from those verses. All I need to know is that God sitting on a throne means that he's a king and a sovereign, and therefore he has a kingdom which has laws that I must obey. And if I don't, then the king can justly punish me, and if I obey them, he can reward me out of his love and mercy. Right? That's what it means. When I say God is hearing, I don't need to know how he hears, but I know that the meaning of him hearing is that I can make a dua to him, and he will respond. So that's why we need to know that. But the intellectual elites have a different goal. So yeah, Irvina, what do you think about that?
Oh, thank you. Yes,
Okay,
it was clear now.
okay, Allah يبارك فيك. The goal of the elite, by the way, is to get to the heart of what reality is, like what is existence. So their quest is a bit different, right? Okay. So Sheikh Al-Akbar talks to them a lot because his goal is also to get to the heart of reality and what is reality. So then he says, if this person who rationally considers the essence of God were just, he would not consider God's essence and would have faith in what has come from God, since proofs have shown him that the report giver, the Messenger ﷺ, has spoken the truth. This is what has held me back in this chapter from speaking about God's essence in accordance with what the proofs of the rational faculty offer. Instead, we turn for knowledge of these things to what has come from the transmitted sources. At the same time, we negate likeness in the attribution. You see? So we turn to the transmitted sources, but we negate likeness, right? And refuse to claim correct knowledge of the reality of the revealed attribute by which the unknown essence has been described, right? So we refuse to claim certainty in correct knowledge. So you're stuck in a midway point where there is tension, and that's where you're supposed to be in the tension between tanzih and tashbih. Thus have I counseled you. Thus have I counseled you. Understand what I've said. Remain steady in what the Sharia has brought for you, and you will be safe. For he knows himself best and he is most truthful in words, right? So I'll give you another example, right? So in one of the Hadith Qudsis, so this Hadith is authentic, so you have to believe in it. God says, when the Son of Man says that God has a son, right? When Ibn Adam says that God has a son, he injures me. I'm injured, right? Or another one is when he curses time, he injures me, but I am time, right? So, you know, the rational faculty would kind of like do a backflip, a somersault, and be really surprised and say, what? God can be injured? You can't injure God. But that's what the report says. Now, we believe in the report, so it's wrong to say that no, he doesn't become injured. He can. You can be injured, um, according to the report, because the rational faculty demands his complete and utter perfection, and being injured is a deficiency, according to the intellect. But on the other hand, at the other end of the scale, you shouldn't start speculating about what that means. Oh, so God can get blisters, he can get hurt feelings. No, 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 no. You shouldn't do that either. So we believe in it. We know it's true, but we don't know how that happens. We don't know the exact way that happens, right? Um, so the awliya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them kashaf. He shows them how these reports of tashbih are true. He shows them how it's true. But it's not something you can explain easily. And by the way, Irvina, that's exactly correct. SubhanAllah. Um, so Maulana narrates a story, but the story is, of course, based on another Hadith Qudsi, right? And so, isn't it funny that the scholars who incline more towards the rational mind, they don't like these stories that much, right? Or they don't emphasize them. Let's say they believe in them, they're pious, but they don't emphasize these stories. So the story that Irvina just mentioned in the chat, it comes from another Hadith Qudsi, in which on the day of judgment, uh, people will come to God, and God will tell them, "Oh, son of Adam, I was hungry, and you didn't give me food to eat. I was thirsty, you didn't give me water to drink, and I was sick, you didn't come visit me." Right? Is there anyone here who hasn't heard that Hadith Qudsi? Because it's a remarkable Hadith Qudsi. Um, and then the son of Adam is shocked. He says, "Excuse me? Aren't you the Lord of the worlds? Aren't you the Lord of the worlds? Like, how am I supposed to feed you or visit you? Like, isn't that a bit crazy?" So then God responds to him and says, "Had you visited this person who was sick, you would have found me with him. You would have found me with him." Right? So there's so many hadith like that. And you know, Sidi Muhammad, like the reason you love the hadith and Irvina brings up the hadith is because like it belongs to like the attributes of tashbih, which bring you closer to God, right? And it, you know, like it's a very warm hadith, which does not turn God into an abstract concept, because God's not an abstract concept, right? If anyone knows that Hadith Qudsi, do you know like that Hadith Qudsi has an exact parallel in another religion? Um, does anyone know what that religion is and which particular book? Yeah, exactly. That Hadith is found in Christianity, in particular in the Gospel of Matthew. So then Jesus Christ, alayhi salam, he tells the disciples, um, he tells them that there will be people on the day of judgment who will come to me, and I will tell them, I was thirsty, you didn't give me water to drink. I was hungry, you didn't give me food to eat. I was sick, you didn't come visit me. I was persecuted, you didn't help me. Right? And so, right, those people are going to have a hard time. And then there's another group of people whom he'll tell them, you gave me water to drink, you helped me when I was persecuted, you gave me food to eat, water to drink, and then they'll enter paradise, right? So then, like, I think it was Michelle Chodkovich who said this, that the essence of hell, the reality of Jahannam hell, comes from that hadith. Like the reality, like the manifestation of Jahannam, it's a manifestation of the hadith, Qudsi, right? Um, yeah, so it's very interesting. So that's why like we take these reports very seriously because they tell you how you should interact with God and interact with creation without thinking how it's true, right? Any thoughts or other questions up to this point? All right, then I'll try and finish let's see, this section. Oh, so some ways to go. Actually, we're at the end of the chapter, which is really nice. Okay, so we're actually on chapter two. I was very ambitious when I said we were in chapter four. Yeah, go ahead, Ravina.
Mm. The first time I encountered Ibn Arabi was actually this topic in a way, the topic of tashbih, because I had read, I think from Ibn Qayyim, that if you love someone else apart from God, then you are an infidel. You are basically an idolater. And then I couldn't grasp this that much, you know. And then I began reading Alone with the Alone, and
Yeah.
Henry Corbin was actually wasn't giving me an answer necessarily,
Mm,
at least was giving me some questions regarding this, you know. And
sure.
I would make just a question to you: how would you approach these kinds of sentences when they say, "Yeah, if you love someone apart from God," um, or similar ones, which we encounter quite often, I think, in literature. How should we understand them in a way?
Okay, so like there's three dimensions to every spiritual seeker. There are three dimensions: Sharia, Tariqah, and Haqiqah. Sharia, Tariqah, and Haqiqah. So there's the law, which is the road. Okay, I mean, you could call it road, but the Tariqah is the actual spiritual path, right? It's how you apply the law, and you travel the spiritual path to God. And the Haqiqah is the reality, right? So law, road, and reality. Okay. Um, those words don't apply on the level of the law. It's a mistake. If I'm not mistaken, Haider Amli tries to do it, but it's a mistake. They don't apply on the level of the law. Like, if you love someone other than God, you're not literally a kafir. A'udhu billah, right? You're not literally a kafir. The law doesn't ask much of you. The only thing that the law requires is that you completely avoid its prohibitions and you do as much as you can of the commands, which aren't that many. So, like, there's like a poor Bedouin who came to Rasulullah. He's like, I'll pray the prayers, I'll give as much zakat as I have, I'll fast, do Hajj, and I won't do anything more than that. But to be like a good believer, you can do way more than that. But he said, I'm not going to do more than that. So then Rasulullah said, In sadaqah, naja. If he's telling the truth, then he's saved. Like you don't need that much, okay? So those words of Ibn Qayyim and other like Sufis who say that, right? They're talking about haqiqah. So in reality, like there's you have love for things that are other than God in your heart. Yeah, that's a kind of idolatry. You're not an idolater on the outward surface, but you're a kind of idolater in your inner reality. So you share something in common with them. So you share something in common with them more than you think. So that's true. And that becomes like a big issue if you're like you know, like a great saint, a great wali of Allah. That's a big issue for him, yes. But for other people, that's actually like their normal state. To not have purified the heart completely, right? So that's how I talk about it. The statement applies on the level of haqiqah. It doesn't apply on the level of sharia, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, but in the level of haqiqah, then who would the lover be? So there
The,
would be
the lover is always God. You just don't know it. You're ignorant of it. The lover is always God. So behind the idol is God.
two.
Behind the thing you love, let's say it's money or it's if you love someone intensely, uh, you know, but you don't see what's the reality behind that person. It's still God, but you're just ignorant of it. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's money or Layla or or an idol.
But wouldn't there be a difference between a Layla and an idol? So
Yeah.
this,
At which level? At which level? At the level of haqiqah, no. At
mm,
the level of haqiqah, no. But at the level of sharia, completely.
yeah, mm, thank you.
Because at the level of haqiqah, it's all God. The only difference is there's difference of divine names. So the divine name behind Layla is different to the divine name behind the idols, which is different to the divine name behind money or food or nature, for example. Yeah.